Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Soul Land 2 Peerless Tang Men based on novel. So let's start. Beautiful. Shusanshi's eyes lit up as he stared at the military-looking girl in front of him. Shusanshi's outward appearance wasn't too bad. He had a square face and a normal-shaped nose and mouth. Even though he wasn't as elegant and scholarly as Bei, he could still be considered good-looking. However, his attitude was completely different than what he looked like. Shongyu, who stood opposite him, was a 1.7-meter-tall lady who appeared to be about 18 or 19 years old. Even though she wasn't a peerless beauty, she still had an extremely slender figure. This was especially so for her long pair of legs, which stood out. Her form-fitting robes further served to accentuate her exceptionally beautiful figure. A pervert such as Shusansha would start observe the lady in front of him from the bottom upwards. Thus, the first thing he saw was her slender, round thighs. When his sight reached her perky chest, his pupils instantly widened. His mouth widened slightly, and it seemed like he was about to start drooling. Fortunately, he knew that Jiang Nannan was still looking at him. Thus, he forced his perverted gaze away from Shongyu's chest and forcefully swallowed the saliva that had gathered to the side of his mouth. Changyu wasn't much older than Shusansha, but she did have a boyfriend. She had clearly seen Shusanshi's performance just now, thus she immediately raised her eyebrows and asked, "What are you looking at?" Shusansha almost subconsciously replied, "Steamed buns." "You?" Changyu immediately flew into a rage, then shot straight towards him. Perhaps due to the fact that the referee couldn't bear to continue watching a certain person's vulgar display, he immediately shouted "Start," then retreated backwards. Chang Yu's fighting style was completely different from Ma Yinjuan's. She had a pair of long blades sheathed on her back, which she proceeded to unsheath the moment that her body shot forwards. As she held one blade in each hand, the 2 4-foot-long blades immediately lit up with a brilliant white light. Afterwards, 2 3-foot-long beams of sword light shot straight towards Shusansha. When he saw this, Shusansha evilly cried out as he blocked Chang Yu's attack with his shield, Ghost. His cry made the already seething Chang Yu immediately launch a storm of sword beams towards him as she slashed madly at him. Although Shusansha talked a lot of shit, he seemed to simply be an airbag at this moment. The only thing he did was unceasingly adjust the position of his shield of the Xuanwu turtle as he cowered behind it, which made it seem as if he had no intentions of attacking. The violent booms coming from the stage, alongside the scene of Shusansha being completely trashed once again, caused both an uproar and a general sense of puzzlement to spread amongst the spectators. From their point of view, Hu Yuhao and Shusansha were both from the same academy. But if that was so, why was there be such a large gap between them? The activation of a soul tool drained quite a bit of soul power. Furthermore, the drain on one's soul power was directly proportional to the might of the close combat soul tool being used. Chang Yu's pair of blades were a Class 3 close combat soul tool, thus they were relatively extraordinary in terms of strength. As she relentlessly poured down powerful blows with no regard for her soul power, Shusansha gradually retreated, step by step. However, despite her powerful cultivation, she still eventually ran out of energy. After yet another flurry of blows, she began to feel that she was overexhausting her soul power. Shusansha, on the other hand, was still 10 or so meters away from the edge of the stage, despite his constant retreating. It wasn't as if Chang Yu hadn't attempted to find a flaw in Shusanshi's defense. However, the latter's use of the shield of the Xuanwu turtle was extremely clever. No matter what way she tried to attack him, he was always able to block it in time. More importantly, whenever she tried to attack him from another direction, the retreating Shusansha would instead steady his footsteps, then retreat in another direction. This way, Chang Yu subconsciously chose to attack him in a frontal manner. Due to the overexhaustion of her soul power, Chang Yu's blades began to slow down. At that moment, the corner of Shusanshi's mouth curled into a smile. I can't hold it anymore. Quick, be more forceful, be more forceful. Bastard. Chang Yu's large eyes went round, then she fiercely inhaled a large mouthful of air. She forcefully gathered the soul power in her body, then re-intensified the power of the blades she was holding as she once again forced Shusansha to retreat backwards. 10 meters, 9 meters, 8 meters, 5 meters, 3 meters, 1 meter finally. Under Chang Yu's unrelenting assault, Shusansha was finally forced to the edge of the stage. Currently, he would fall off if he took just a single step backwards. On the stage, Shusansha kept an innocent look on his face as he looked towards her. He shrugged his shoulders, then said, "You can't blame me. It's just that you were so bouncy that you got yourself bounced out. A mistake, that was definitely a mistake." However, his gaze was fixated on Chang Yu's protruding buttocks the entire time he spoke. Worse, once he'd finished speaking, his gaze turned towards Jiang Nan, who was seated within the resting area. Jiang Nan's expression became frosty, and she turned to retrieve a pair of scissors from somewhere unknown. She then grabbed an elongated fruit from the table in front of her. Snip. Shusansha instantly felt a certain area of his body tighten up, and he immediately turned around. He now had a righteous look on his face as he said to the referee, "I've won. Let's move on to the next match." The referee's gaze towards him became somewhat strange. He'd never seen such a strange competition in his life. At that moment, the leader of Cloud Luo Advanced Soul Engineering Academy's team took the stage and took large strides towards Shusansha. From the viewpoint of the spectators, this leader should have been angry and lashed out at Shusansha due to his previous actions. However, the fact that he didn't do so astonished even the referee somewhat. Although he had a somewhat chilly and stern expression on his face as he faced Shusansha, he didn't fly into a rage as he spoke. Instead, he bowed slightly to Shusansha, then said, "Cloud Luo Advanced Soul Engineering Academy, Sichu Yu." Shusansha seemed to have felt something as well. The relaxed look on his face vanished slightly. Shrek, Shusansha. In the waiting area, Wang Yang had a relaxed expression on his face. Since they were quite near the platform, they had heard the conversation between the two of them. Hu Yuhao, on the other hand, felt a bit depressed. After several attempts, he discovered that his spiritual detection could indeed get past the protective barrier. Nevertheless, the spiritual power required to do so was enormous. The consumption rate of using the AoE spiritual detection through the barrier was the same as when he focused it in a single direction normally. If he were to use it to assist one of them, his soul power would rapidly deplete. As such, it was impossible for him to keep it active all the time. However, Shusansha didn't seem to be in trouble. Hence, he decided not to take any action. Even Hu Yuhao had yet to experience Shusanshi's real power. Aside from Wang Yang, Bei Bei was also calm. However, the nearby Jiang Nan was currently staring at the platform, the scissors in her hand continuously snipping. At this moment, her beautiful face was expressionless, and no one knew what she was thinking. On the platform, Shusansha and Sichu Yu had already retreated to their respective sides of the arena. The referee looked at both of them, then shouted, "Start." Sichu Yu, who had been standing still a moment ago, suddenly appeared to grow 1,000 hands in the blink of an eye, while his body began to emit several loud mechanical sounds. The scene that played out was similar to Hu Yuhao and Hikaitu's first encounter. A large number of metallic pipes emerged from his body. Sichu Yu's body almost doubled in size in just a few breaths worth of time. His stout and powerful legs now had 3 support-like metal shapes each. These 3 fingernail-like objects were as thick as a small arm, very sharp, and after popping out, immediately burrowed into the ground to form a very stable base. Afterwards, a large number of assault-type soul tools began to emerge from his calves. Hu Yuhao was continuously monitoring the situation on the platform, thus when these soul tools were released, he discovered that 6 places on Sichu Yu's body had begun emanating different types of lights. Next, a large number of soul tools began to pop up all over his body. These soul tools hadn't been installed on his body beforehand, but instead were activated just now. 3 short metallic pipes proceeded to then grow out of Sichu Yu's calves. At the same time, a thick and heavy metallic shell wrapped his body. He now looked like a fortress. Hu Yuhao was able to see at least 30 metallic pipes on his body. The largest number were concentrated on his chest, which were emitting a pale dark gold light. It was a concentrated soul cannon with more than a 1.5 meter caliber. Right now, Sichu Yu looked even scarier than the fully armed Hikaitu that Hu Yuhao had seen. In fact, he looked like a killing machine. Those pipes made of pure metal gave off a cool feeling. 4 soul rings, 2 yellow and 2 purple, had also appeared beneath his feet. A white light also appeared behind his body, then changed into a huge fan. It almost seemed as if he were carrying the huge fan on his back. Hikaitu moved next to Hu Yuhao, then said in a low voice, "Junior brother, take a good look. That's the fortress formation, the pinnacle of attack and defense amongst us soul engineers, the fortress formation." Hu Yuhao asked, somewhat confused. Hikaitu nodded and said, "Yeah, that's the fortress formation, also known as the soul tool fortress. An armor-type soul tool is currently protecting his body, which sharply increases his defense." Furthermore, several more soul tools are equipped all over his body. Amongst these, there are also some auxiliary soul tools to recover soul power. Considering all of this, both the defense and attack of a soul engineer will skyrocket. They'll be able to utilize a great deal of power for a short while. Beneath 7 rings, a soul master will hardly be a match for someone of the same rank using a soul tool fortress. Why didn't teacher tell me about this? Hui Yu Hao asked, surprised. He Kai too laughed and said, the soul tool fortress consumes a large quantity of soul power. Only after obtaining your 3rd ring will you be able to completely display its power. Your current level of soul power is too low, you can't use it quite yet. Furthermore, our teacher doesn't like this sort of thing very much. Hui Yu Hao eyes widened and he asked, why? He Kai too replied, junior brother, just think about it. Aside from the great offensive and defensive power, what other feelings do you gain from this fortress? Hui Yu Hao thought for a bit, then said, it's reliable and stable. However, the strong and weak points of this gadget were very clear. The strong points lay in explosive strength, wide coverage, and high attack power. However, there was only one notable flaw, which was a critical one: it consumed a large amount of soul power. A Class 4 soul engineer could use a 6-barreled miniature soul cannon for 5 minutes at most before they had to stop to recover their soul power. Facing this attack, Shusansha used the most simple way to deal with it. Facing an all-out attack from a 6-barreled miniature soul cannon, the only way out for most soul ancestors was to run as far away as fast as possible. The soul cannon couldn't attack from too far away. Its attack range was more or less only about 100 meters. Therefore, if there was a certain distance between you and them, you wouldn't be in great danger. However, right now, they were on a platform and there weren't really any places to hide. Furthermore, even if he started running, Shusansha wouldn't be able to outrun artillery shells made of soul power. He simply raised his shield of the Xuanwu turtle and placed it in front of his body. Afterwards, he squatted down and shrank behind it, completely hiding himself behind his shield. Powerful explosions continuously struck the shield of the Xuanwu turtle. At the same time, a black halo spread out from it. Shusansha seemed to have fallen into a passive state. He didn't budge from his original position. However, the shield of the Xuanwu turtle looked like an impregnable fortress. There wasn't even a scratch on it. At this moment, he couldn't rely on Hui Yu Hao's spiritual detection. Therefore, he took action when he felt that no attacks were hitting the shield. He dashed forward as soon as he stood up, and his 2nd soul ring also lit up. If those 6 white balls in the air had kept following their original trajectory, they would have completely missed Shusansha. However, it seemed that they had locked onto their target. Now that Shusansha was now leaving them behind, they changed their trajectory and started to pursue him. But Shusansha, who was rushing forward, hadn't yet realized anything. I won. Whenever Sichu you would encounter this situation, he had always obtained victory. All the metal pipes forming his soul tool fortress suddenly lit up. His entire body was so brightly lit up that it seemed to be engulfed in white flames. Dozens of white lights exploded and shot toward Shusansha. At this time in the waiting area, Bei Bei suddenly said to Hui Yu Hao in a low voice, look carefully. His voice had yet to fade when something unexpected happened on the platform. Facing this simultaneous attack from the front and rear, Shusansha seemed to be at a dead end. If he were to use his shield to block the attack from the front, he wouldn't be able to defend the attack from behind properly. The strength of the white balls could be easily deduced by how concentrated they were. What could one do in this situation? Shusansha gave the answer. He doubled his speed in an instant. The spectators only saw a flash, and his body disappeared. He left behind dozens of afterimages, and 2/3 of the light beams and artillery shells coming from the front missed. In addition, 4 of the white balls behind him were destroyed by the attack he had just dodged. That wasn't all. The shield of the Xuanwu turtle broke, and split into many small shields the size of a palm as they scattered in all directions. Every shield accurately protected him from the attacks he couldn't dodge. The 2 white balls at the rear were no exception. At this moment, if one could see Shusanshi's expression from close up, they would notice that his carefree expression had disappeared. Instead, a cold light was flashing through his eyes. All the small scattered shields reunited once again into the shield of the Xuanwu turtle. Then, when the rank 4 concentrated soul cannon fired, he took a quick step to his left. This single step changed everything. The concentrated soul cannon could lock onto an enemy, but with this move, Shusansha wouldn't take the hit head-on, but from a slanted angle. At the same time, the shield of the Xuanwu turtle released a black light as it morphed into a shining mirror. The terrifying attack of the concentrated soul cannon hit the shield. However, it did so at an angle. This caused the blazing white light to be reflected towards the protective barrier above the platform. Shusanshi's feet were like 2 huge boulders as he stood firmly in place. But he wasn't done yet. After reflecting the attack, he pounced forward like a lion and ruthlessly smashed into Sichu Yu's soul tool fortress from the side. With a thunderous boom, Sichu Yu, who was not far from the edge of the ring, was sent flying. The base he had dug into the earth was also uprooted. Sichu Yu slammed against the light screen of the protective barrier and collapsed to the ground. After using the soul tool fortress, Sichu Yu's weight had surpassed 250 kilograms. But when Shusancha hit him, he was immediately sent flying without the slightest resistance. It was truly a beautiful collision, a showdown of pure brute force. Shusancha, who was standing at the edge of the platform, had that carefree smile on his face once again. He looked at Cloud Luo Academy's waiting area, and said to the dumbfounded Ma Yingjun, "I didn't trick you. I went easy on you, yes, yes." Ma Yingjun nodded repeatedly. There was nothing else he could do anyway. Xiao Xiao said in a low voice, "Senior Shu was actually this strong." Till now, Shusancha hadn't left a deep impression on the other members. After all, he was a defense-type soul master. You wouldn't expect him to have any explosive or powerful skills, and on top of that, he spent most of his time pestering Jiang Nan Nan. Only today, after he defeated 3 opponents in a row, was everyone able to see his real power. He defeated a Class 4 soul engineer while being a soul ancestor with 4 soul rings. This alone was enough to make his strength clear. Not to mention that he had easily defeated 3 opponents in a row. Bei Bei smiled faintly and said, "Since he always acts shamefully, you guys must have forgotten that when you entered the academy, he was already in the 6th year. If you think about it, he should have already entered the inner courtyard by now." However, he was so dead set on Nan Nan that he lowered his grades on purpose. I remember that his teachers were so angry that they nearly spat blood. Moreover, he is the most talented defense-type soul master I've ever seen. Anyone would pay the price for looking down on him. Amongst our group of 7, he ranks first when it comes to cultivation level. After all, you can't measure the strength of Shrek Academy's students with the number of soul rings alone, right? Bei Bei was speaking the truth. You couldn't properly measure the strength of the students of Shrek Academy just by looking at the number of soul rings they had. Shusancha had entered the academy when he was very young, and when he was 15, he could have graduated from the outer courtyard and taken the test to enter the inner courtyard. One could imagine how high his cultivation was. How could someone that was hailed as the number 1 genius of the outer courtyard together with Bei Bei be so simple? When making a proper evaluation, you had to take natural talent, strength, fighting capacity, and other various aspects into consideration. Shusanchi's mysterious Xuanwu turtle martial soul was one of the strongest defense-type martial souls in his generation. This martial soul allowed the owner to possess an eternal and everlasting defense. In all these years, Bei Bei had never heard of any fellow student being able to break through Shusanchi's defense. "Brother, you should keep your word," Shusancha told Sichu Yu. Sichu Yu had fallen from the platform, and was slowly getting up with great difficulty. What Sichu Yu feared the most was exactly what had happened. The soul tool fortress covered his whole body, and many soul tools had been damaged after the fall. His own body had also received quite the shock, as he was bleeding from both nose and mouth. With the help of his teammates, he was finally able to get out of the mountain of soul tools. He carefully raised his head and looked at Shusancha. Then, he nodded and said, "I lost, and I'm sincerely convinced. Our Cloud Luo Academy admits defeat." Shusancha laughed heartily, "You actually kept your word. You're a real man. Your offensive power is not half bad. However, I advise you to join the army. You won't be able to achieve much with this technique in 1v1 matches." As soon as he finished speaking, he looked toward his own waiting area and raised his hands. Shrek Academy had obtained victory in their first match. Just like last time, they had only used 1 person. However, the situation was a bit different from last time. This time, they had sent out a defense-type soul master with 4 soul rings. This soul master had single-handedly defeated a soul engineering academy. Even if he had only faced 3 opponents, anyone could tell they were Cloud Luo Academy's strongest students. The remaining team members were merely soul elders with 3 soul rings, and had no way of achieving victory. At this moment, he couldn't rely on Hui Yuhao's spiritual detection. Therefore, he took action when he felt that no attacks were hitting the shield. He dashed forward as soon as he stood up, and his second soul ring also lit up. If those 6 white balls in the air had kept following their original trajectory, they would have completely missed Shusancha. However, it seemed that they had locked onto their target. Now that Shusancha was now leaving them behind, they changed their trajectory and started to pursue him. But Shusancha, who was rushing forward, hadn't yet realized anything. I won. Whenever Sichu Yu would encounter this situation, he had always obtained victory. All the metal pipes forming his soul tool fortress suddenly lit up. His entire body was so brightly lit up that it seemed to be engulfed in white flames. Dozens of white lights exploded and shot toward Shusansha. At this time in the waiting area, Bei Bei suddenly said to Hui Yuhao in a low voice, "Look carefully." His voice had yet to fade when something unexpected happened on the platform. Facing this simultaneous attack from the front and rear, Shusansha seemed to be at a dead end. If he were to use his shield to block the attack from the front, he wouldn't be able to defend the attack from behind properly. The strength of the white balls could be easily deduced by how concentrated they were. What could one do in this situation? Shusansha gave the answer. He doubled his speed in an instant. The spectators only saw a flash, and his body disappeared. He left behind dozens of afterimages, and 2/3 of the light beams and artillery shells coming from the front missed. In addition, 4 of the white balls behind him were destroyed by the attack he had just dodged. That wasn't all. The shield of the Xuanwu turtle broke, and split into many small shields the size of a palm, as they scattered in all directions. Every shield accurately protected him from the attacks he couldn't dodge. The 2 white balls at the rear were no exception. Thunderous explosions were echoing around him, and yet, not a single attack hit his body. With this sudden acceleration, Shusansha had dodged the heavy fire and arrived in front of Sichu Yu. Sichu Yu was extremely surprised. How could a defense-type Soul Master move so quickly? But he was still Cloud Luo Academy's captain. Despite being surprised, he didn't forget to attack with his Soul Tool Fortress. That rank 4 concentrated soul cannon lit up. He hadn't used it before due to its excessive consumption of soul power. But at this time, it hardly mattered. He mustered all the soul power in his body, which was amplified by the martial soul behind his back, and poured it inside the concentrated soul cannon. Everyone could see the mouth of the cannon starting to light up. The white light coming out of the cannon suddenly began to turn darken. At the same time, the air on the platform started to become restless. Sichu Yu had a frenzied expression on his face. At last, he attacked. At this moment, if one could see Shusanshi's expression from close up, they would notice that his carefree expression had disappeared. Instead, a cold light was flashing through his eyes. All the small scattered shields reunited once again into the shield of the Xuanwu turtle. Then, when the rank 4 concentrated soul cannon fired, he took a quick step to his left. After using the Soul Tool Fortress, Sichu Yu's weight had surpassed 250 kilograms. But when Shusansha hit him, he was immediately sent flying without the slightest resistance. It was truly a beautiful collision, a showdown of pure brute force. Shusansha, who was standing at the edge of the platform, had that carefree smile on his face once again. He looked at Cloud Luo Academy's waiting area, and said to the dumbfounded Ma Yingjun, "I didn't trick you. I went easy on you." "Yes, yes." Ma Yingjun nodded repeatedly. There was nothing else he could do anyway. Xiao Xiao said in a low voice, "Senior, she was actually this strong." Till now, Shusansha hadn't left a deep impression on the other members. After all, he was a defense-type Soul Master. You wouldn't expect him to have any explosive or powerful skills, and on top of that, he spent most of his time pestering Jiang Nan Nan. Only today, after he defeated 3 opponents in a row, was everyone able to see his real power. He defeated a Class 4 Soul Engineer while being a Soul Ancestor with 4 Soul Rings. This alone was enough to make his strength clear. Not to mention that he had easily defeated 3 opponents in a row. Bei Bei smiled faintly and said, "Since he always acts shamefully, you guys must have forgotten that when you entered the academy, he was already in the 6th year. If you think about it, he should have already entered the inner courtyard by now." However, he was so dead set on Nan Nan that he lowered his grades on purpose. I remember that his teachers were so angry that they nearly spat blood. Moreover, he is the most talented defense-type Soul Master I've ever seen. Anyone would pay the price for looking down on him. Amongst our group of 7, he ranks first when it comes to cultivation level. After all, you can't measure the strength of Shrek Academy's students with the number of soul rings alone, right? Bei Bei was speaking the truth. You couldn't properly measure the strength of the students of Shrek Academy just by looking at the number of soul rings they had. Shusansha had entered the academy when he was very young, and when he was 15, he could have graduated from the outer courtyard and taken the test to enter the inner courtyard. One could imagine how high his cultivation was. How could someone that was hailed as the number 1 genius of the outer courtyard together with Bei Bei be so simple? When making a proper evaluation, you had to take natural talent, strength, fighting capacity, and other various aspects into consideration. Xu Sanxi's mysterious Xuanwu turtle martial soul was one of the strongest defense-type martial souls in his generation. This martial soul allowed the owner to possess an eternal and everlasting defense. In all these years, Bei had never heard of any fellow student being able to break through Xu Sanxi's defense. Brother, you should keep your word, Xu Sanxia told Sichu Yu. Sichu Yu had fallen from the platform and was slowly getting up with great difficulty. What Sichu Yu feared the most was exactly what had happened. The soul tool fortress covered his whole body, and many soul tools had been damaged after the fall. His own body had also received quite the shock, as he was bleeding from both nose and mouth. With the help of his teammates, he was finally able to get out of the mountain of soul tools. He carefully raised his head and looked at Xu Sanxia. Then, he nodded and said, I lost, and I'm sincerely convinced. Our Cloud Luo Academy admits defeat. Xu Sanxia laughed heartily. You actually kept your word. You're a real man. Your offensive power is not half bad. However, I advise you to join the army. You won't be able to achieve much with this technique in 1v1 matches. As soon as he finished speaking, he looked toward his own waiting area and raised his hands. The winner is Shrek Academy. As soon as the referee announced the winner, the audience exploded in cheers. The disappointed masses had completely changed their attitude. Even if Xu Sanxia had resorted to trickery in the first two matches, he had fought fair and square in the last one. Although they didn't know what kind of ability he had used, the fact that Shrek Academy had obtained victory with just a single participant was undeniable. No one sitting in Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineering Academy's resting area dared to utter a word. When they saw that the student sent by Shrek Academy was just a soul ancestor, they didn't take him too seriously. Hence, they received a huge psychological blow when they saw his domineering performance. Xiao Hongchen furrowed his brows. No one knew what he was thinking. Then, the young girl sitting beside him, who had a very similar face, whispered, Elder brother, what are you thinking about? If we were to take his place, we would be able to do it too, right? Xiao Hongchen shook his head and said, I don't know. We are both soul masters and soul engineers. When fighting, we'll continuously consume our soul power. In the 1v1 matches of the Continental Advanced Academy Soul Dueling Tournament, there is no time to take breaks. Do you really think you can defeat 7 opponents despite continuously consuming your soul power? The young girl said somewhat unwillingly, but he didn't defeat 7 opponents either. He only fought 3. Xiao Hongchen said, but he still managed to win. Did you see the footwork he used just now? The young girl was startled. She shook her head and replied, it was too sudden. I wasn't able to see. Xiao Hongchen sighed and said, neither could I. And although he wasn't able to completely dodge the attack, when he used that footwork, it sent chills down my spine. Moreover, during his 3 matches, he only used 2 soul skills. To be precise, his second and 4th skills. He didn't even need to use the remaining 2. From start to end, he gave the impression of doing things half-heartedly, but despite all that, he still managed to win. A person of great wisdom often seems slow-witted. That guy is most definitely a top-level defense-type soul master. 5 years later, we'll have to face this powerful opponent. The young girl pouted her lips, still unwilling to accept what he said. Xiao Hongchen sighed once again. Shrek Academy is really Shrek Academy. Both in this and the previous battle, they managed to deal a huge blow to my morale. The young girl chuckled and said, give me a break. Your morale received a huge blow. I don't think your morale has ever wavered. No matter who your opponent is, you've always been confident in your own victory. Xiao Hongchen laughed, all right. You're not wrong. I really want to have a good fight now. I wonder what the real strength of that boy from the first match is. The young girl snorted and said, that boy can't really have 600,000-year soul rings, right? What do you think? Xiao Hongchen asked with a smile. The young girl stuck out her tongue and said, I think it's impossible. Xu Sanxia returned to his friends with a satisfied expression on his face. Everyone warmly congratulated him. After all, it was their first win in the round-robin phase. Senior Xu, I didn't expect you to be so strong. Xiao Xiao looked at Xu Sanxia excitedly. Later, you have to give me a few pointers about defense. Even if my 3-live Soul Crush Cauldron is a control-type martial soul, it excels the most at defense, sure. I'm always happy to help my fellow students. Xu Sanxia said smugly. Wang Yang stood up and patted Xu Sanxi's shoulder, come, let's go. Following which, he led the team outside. Shrek Academy's members once again left Star Luo Plaza under the gazes of the masses. On the city walls of the inner city, the emperor also stood up. He had a faint smile on his face as he muttered, "So it was this boy. I know who he is, and he really has huge guts. Despite embarrassing me like that, he still came to participate in the competition. Anyway, what a pity." After mumbling to himself, the emperor headed toward the innards of the inner city. It seemed that he too had no interest in watching the next matches. Outside Star Luo Plaza, Hu Yuhao arrived beside Wang Yang and asked in a low voice, "Teacher Wang, shouldn't we look at the next matches? At the very least, we should watch Sun Moon Imperial Seoul Engineering Academy's match. They are in the second group, and will also be fighting today." Wang Yang shook his head and replied, "Instead of wasting time here, you should go back and cultivate. I alone am enough to observe the other teams. Right now, you should preserve your strength and stay in top condition. Shu Sanxia did a great job today. He allowed us to win the first match, while simultaneously hiding our true strength either. We'll have to maintain this secrecy for a few more matches. After Xiao Dao and the others recover, things will be easier." Wang Dong was startled as he said, "Were you spying on Teacher Wang just now?" Hu Yuhao nodded and said, "Teacher Wang said that he alone would be enough to observe the matches. Therefore, he could have stayed back. There was no need for him to accompany everyone till the hotel. On top of that, he was walking very quickly, and his mood seemed somewhat unstable. The reason he accompanied us to the hotel was to make us leave Star Luo Plaza and not let us see the other matches." Then after hearing these words, Wang Dong seemed to have thought of something. "We're not familiar with the names drawn through the lots. After all, this is our first time participating in the tournament. Even if we know that our opponent is from a certain academy, we won't know what their true strength is. Which means that Teacher Wang was planning to conceal the strength of our opponents. That seems like the only possible explanation." They looked at each other and said at the same time, "The teams we will have to face in this round-robin phase must be really strong." After speaking their mind, they both fell silent. If this was really the case, Wang Yang's actions were reasonable. His purpose was very simple, to protect them from having their fighting spirit crushed. If they wanted to get past the round-robin phase, they needed to obtain 5 or more victories. With 6 victories, they were guaranteed to pass. They would have to wait for 2 more matches for Ling Luo Chen to recover. And 4 matches for Ma Xiaodao and Dai Yueheng. Thus, if their opponents in the next few matches were very strong, they would be under a lot of pressure. "Let's go and take a look." Hu Yuhao pulled Wang Dong along and left the room. Wang Dong quickly stopped him and said, "We can't. Star Luo Plaza is under the protection of the army. If try to disguise ourselves, we won't be able to enter. And if we go back without a disguise, wouldn't we ruin our reputation? We cannot destroy the mystery that surrounds us." Hu Yuhao shook his head and said, "I'm not planning to go back to Star Luo Plaza. Just follow me." With that, he brought Wang Dong out of the room. After confirming that there was no one around, he pulled him towards the window at the end of the corridor. After opening the window, he pointed upward and said, "Fly, and take me to the roof." Wang Dong's eyes lit up. He had already understood what Hu Yuhao was planning, but isn't it too far? Hu Yuhao said, "The Grand Imperial Star Hotel is the tallest building around Star Luo Plaza. We should have a fairly decent vantage point. Even if it's a bit far, it shouldn't be a problem. Don't forget about the properties of my martial soul. Let's give it a try." "All right," Wang Dong replied. He lowered his head and exited the window. The wings of the radiant butterfly goddess unfurled, and he started to float in mid-air. Next, Hu Yuhao pounced toward him and wrapped his arms around him. "You guys," Wang Dong looked at everyone in shock as he placed Hu Yuhao on the roof. Bei Bei put the telescopic soul tool down and replied, "Teacher Wang may be unmatched when it comes to researching martial souls, however he's very inexperienced when it comes to concealing his emotions." "Then why didn't you guys call us?" Wang Dong said resentfully, "That's because junior brother clearly saw through it. You guys have to remember not to be too expressive. Otherwise, anyone with a shred of intelligence would be able to discern your thoughts," said Bei Bei. Wang Dong felt gloomy as he said, "Aren't you only implying that I'm dumber than you guys?" Xiao Xiao weakly raised her hand and said, "Me too. Senior brother told me there's a good show going on and brought me up here. Those who could be a part of the Shrek's 7 monsters were prodigies in their own right." Hu Yuhao wasn't the only one who recognized Wang Yang's problem. Bei Bei, Shu Sanxia and He Kai too were also aware of it. Jiang Nan Nan and Xiao Xiao were the only ones that had been called up. "Nan Nan, can I take a look?" Shu Sanxia inched over to Jiang Nanan's side, fawning all over her. Where had the powerful aura he had possessed during the tournament gone to? He Kai too had brought 2 telescopic soul tools along with him. He'd given one to Bei Bei and handed the other over to Shu Sanxia. For appearance's sake, Shu Sanxia had immediately handed it to Jiang Nan Nan. Jiang Nan Nan ignored him and said, "The tournament's starting. The Grand Imperial Star Hotel and Star Luo Plaza was separated by a few kilometers, which was extremely far for the eye to see. From this distance, the massive tournament plaza was but a very small square. It was more or less impossible for one to observe the ongoings clearly. Even Hikai Tu, with the telescopic soul tool, couldn't see what was going on too clearly. Hu Yuhao said, "Senior brother, let me test out that telescopic soul tool." Bei Bei handed the telescopic soul tool that looked like a metal box over to Hu Yuhao. Hu Yuhao took the telescopic soul tool and peered through the transparent convex-shaped crystal, looking into the distance through the enlargement device installed within. One only had to pour a bit of their soul power into the telescopic soul tool to use it. It was a very simple auxiliary soul tool. Since there weren't many soul tool masters willing to put much effort into this aspect, they were only rank 1 soul tools. Naturally, it couldn't enlarge the image in the distance by a large amount. However, Hu Yuhao's eyesight was exceptionally shocking. His eyes were his martial soul, and he'd also been cultivating the purple demon eyes all along. Naturally, everything would be much clearer to Bei Bei if he could use the purple demon eyes too. Even without the help of this telescopic soul tool, he would only need to use a bit of soul power if he wanted to clearly see what was going on a few kilometers away on a good day. Hu Yuhao expanded his spiritual sharing as he watched what was going on the tournament stage. It wasn't that he couldn't use his spiritual sharing only when he used his spiritual detection. He could use it on a normal basis too, just like what he was doing now. Hu Yuhao shared what he could see with his friends through his spiritual sharing. The 4 soul skills the Sky Dream Iceworm gave him didn't seem to be very powerful at first glance, but all of them were incomparably mystical in their own right. The reserve team of Shrek's 7 monsters only had to close their eyes for the scenes Hu Yuhao saw to appear in their minds. The match held in Star Luo Plaza wasn't the first match held since they left, but rather a 1 vs 1 showdown. Even though you put it that way, what do you think is implied with them having Soul Kings as their commanding officers? Bei Bei asked. Hu Yuhao subconsciously answered, it means there's a very high possibility that their team is made up entirely of soul ancestors. Bei Bei nodded and said, "Junior brother is right. I'm afraid we have an arduous battle ahead of us from now on. We also definitely have to reveal our true strength. With team members composed of soul ancestors with a Soul King as their leader, their strength surpasses ours completely as a whole. We definitely can't duplicate what happened in the first match. Everyone must be mentally prepared. Our victory in the first 2 matches was due to our opponents being weak along with a small bit of luck. The latter matches will be more difficult. I'm afraid Teacher Wang only lied to us a little. There really are quite a number of 20-year-old Soul Kings this time around." Shusansha shrugged and said, "It doesn't matter, Bei Bei. After all, we can have Soul Kings in our team in the next 2 matches. Senior Sister Ling is a control-type Soul King. With her deployed in battle, we won't have a problem anymore." Bei Bei glared at him and said, "Stop talking nonsense. Don't think I don't know what you're hiding. We're competing in this tournament, which means that we're representing Shrek Academy's honor. At the very least, we're enjoying the treatment of being core disciples in the academy. Now it's time for us to protect the academy's honor. Even if we use the last shred of our energy, I will not permit myself to lose on stage. Shusansha, you better get your act together. We must definitely win the next 2 matches. We have to give it everything we've got before our senior brothers and sisters return." Bei Bei hit the nail on the head with this one, exuding a mighty power that he'd never had before along with his words. His martial soul was the blue lightning tyrant dragon. By nature, he had the tyrannical aura of a king, but the only difference was that he normally hid it extremely well. Unless it was under the conditions of a fight, no one could feel that aura around him. This was the first time Hu Yuhao had seen Bei Bei look so serious. He immediately felt a shiver run down his spine. Shusansha frowned. "Bei Bei, isn't it too early? You ought to know that this tournament doesn't actually belong to us. If we reveal our true abilities too early, our opponents are sure to pursue countermeasures against us in 5 years." Bei Bei lowered his voice and said, "But we can't wait. Sansha, do you have such little faith in what's to come in 5 years? 5 years is a very long time to us." Shusansha gazed deeply at Bei Bei and said, "If you want to go all in, I'll go along with you." Wang Dong looked towards Shusansha. "Senior Shu, can I ask a question? During our match today, how much strength did you use?" Shusansha thought about it for a moment. "About 30 or 40%. In reality, Teacher Wang's estimations were wrong. I only can release my full strength when I work together with Bei Bei. We were a couple in the first place." "Don't be so full of air when you speak," Bei Bei said gloomily. "Who's a couple with you?" "We're partners." "Explain it clearly." "Che," Shusansha curled his lips. "Could it be that you don't know who I like?" This brother's orientations are perfectly normal. With that, his gaze immediately landed on Jiang Nanan's body. However, Jiang Nan didn't even spare him a glance. She thoughtlessly walked over to Xiao Xiao's side, and with a flick of the wrist, the pair of scissors that had previously appeared during the match once again appeared. 30 to 40% of his strength. They were all four ringed soul masters, but just how strong was Shu Sansha? Furthermore, there was also Bei Bei, who had similarly hidden his strength. Suddenly, Hui Yuhao felt as if the preparatory team he was in wasn't as weak as they seemed on the surface. Hui Yuhao asked, Senior Bei, does Teacher Wang know that you have been unofficially declared a member of Shrek's 7 monsters? Bei Bei shook his head. Teacher Wang doesn't know. This is a high-level secret in the academy. Only the 2 deans of the Martial Soul Department and the elders of the Sea Gods Pavilion know of it. The Sea Gods Pavilion is the highest level of command that our academy has, and it's based on Sea Gods Island. According to the stories, the master of the Sea Gods Pavilion is the true number 1 expert our academy has. Only, he keeps watch from Sea Gods Island, and even we have never seen what he looks like. He's even stronger than Elder Xian. Hui Yuhao asked astonishedly. From his recollections, Elder Xian was already a near-omnipotent super-expert due to the terrifying speed at which he'd flown alongside them, and the catastrophic level of strength that he'd released when he'd flown into a rage. Bei Bei shrugged. Hasn't Elder Xian already said it before? He's the vice-captain of our Shrek Guardians. Since there's a vice-captain, there's naturally a captain. Our captain is the master of the Sea Gods Pavilion. Only, nobody has ever seen him make a move. This video will end here. Thank you for watching.